Hello and welcome to this Price a Job tutorial. In this video we'll be taking a look at the ground floors module for timber floors. To access the timber floors module, first go to the ground floors category here in the module toolbar and select timber floors. Here you can rename the module title, then click create. And this opens the timber floor module. If we expand our sketch pane, we'll see a 3D model representation of our timber floor that we can rotate to have a closer look, and is also interactive with our various stages. Here we can see our walls below DPC, which our timber floor will be resting on. Here we can set the length of our timber floor by either using the slider or inputting the value manually, and the same with our width. For this example, we'll set our width at 5.5 meters, and as a helpful tip, make note that this is in meters, not millimeters. If you were to input 5500 here thinking it was millimeters, you would end up with a room 5.5 kilometers long. So the length and the width here is represented in meters. Here we can set the spacing. In this case it's set for 400 millimeters. We can change the spacing to maybe 350. And Price a Job automatically calculates the number of joists that will be required, in this case 13 joists at 5.5 meters. Next we can take a look at the excavation stage. Price a Job has calculated the total volume of soil to be excavated to be 6.6 cubic meters based on a depth of 300 millimeters. If we adjust our depth, say maybe 400 millimeters, the volume of soil to be excavated will change automatically as well, in this case 8.8 cubic meters. Then we have the option to excavate either by hand or machine, and we can see the costs for that are greatly affected. So in this case we'll stick with machine, and then from the drop-down list we can choose the machine that we'll be using for excavation, and under the cog settings we can adjust the productivity per hour, the delivery and collection cost, and fuel consumption per hour. But if you're not certain what these are, you can leave it set as is, as these are standard measurements based on the machine selected. Next we'll take a look at the disposal of soil stage. And Price a Job has calculated 10.7 cubic meters of soil to be disposed. Compared to only 8.8 cubic meters of soil excavated, the difference here is in soil expansion, which we can see here under the cog settings is set at 22%. Depending on your soil quality, your expansion rate may be different, and you can adjust that here if necessary. Here we can specify whether the load method for the disposal is to be done by machine or by hand, and Price a Job has automatically calculated the quantity and size of skips required to remove this volume of soil. This irregular quantity of skips will be combined with our other modules to maximize the use of our available skips. If this is the only module that you'll be using that requires skips, you can click the plus button to round this up to the next nearest whole number. Next is the hardcore fill. Here we can specify the thickness of our hardcore, and if we rotate our sketch image around a little bit, we have the option to deselect the hardcore if this is not required, and this removes this material from our sketch. And this will depend upon your structural specifications. In this case we'll leave the hardcore included, and we can adjust the thickness, let's say 150 mils, and that's updated in the sketch. We also have the option to choose either crushed concrete or the superior MOT type 1. Under the cog settings, we can adjust the hardcore ratio in kilograms per cubic meter. Next is the Oversite Concrete, and Price a Job has calculated that we'll require 2.2 cubic meters based on a concrete thickness of 100 millimeters. If we were to adjust this to 150, then the volume of concrete required would adjust automatically. Here we can specify whether we'll be using a ready mix, a mix on site, or a concrete pump. In each case, we can select the concrete mix we'll be using. If we're mixing on site, we can set the ratio or specify a custom ratio by inputting our cement and ballast ratios separately. And if we'll be using a concrete pump, we can set the quantity and adjust the productivity in cubic meters per day, the minimum concrete load, and the part load charge. And Price a Job has used this information to automatically calculate the part load charge. Next we can take a look at the sleeper wall, and this is to support the floor. We can toggle the deselect button to see this represented within the sketch. Your requirement for sleeper walls will depend on the structural engineer or architect's specifications, and is largely dependent on the width of your joists. So for example, if we were to use a narrower joist, drop this down to 95 mils, we would require more sleeper walls to support the floor. So in that case we might add 3 sleeper walls underneath to provide adequate support. In this case, we'll stick with the 195mm joists, and we can refer to our specifications to see how many sleeper walls we need. We can add as many or as few as necessary. Then we can also adjust the height of our sleeper walls to create a void for ventilation. And again, this will depend on your structural specifications. We can set this to 150 to provide just a very narrow void. If we're unsure of the specification for this, we can consult the Price of Job Library of Building Regulations, and this is found here in the top navigation bar under Building Regs. Just click on this, and then we can select the flooring category, and select timber floors, and Price of Job will display the regulations relevant to this module. So for example, here we're looking at the sleeper wall spacing, and we can see that a minimum of at least 150mm is required. So now that we're sure about that, we can go back to our estimate here in the navigation pane, and go back to our timber floors module, and we can indeed set our sleeper wall at a height of 150mm. Next, we'll take a look at the stage for timber joists. Price of Job has calculated that we'll require 78 meters of timber joists, and the sizing will depend on your structural specifications. Here we have selected 6-meter lengths, but Price of Job will use as a default what it believes to be the most appropriate size, in this case 6-meter boards, and we've set our sizing at 47 by 195 mils. And based on the measurements input, Price of Job has calculated that we'll require 13 boards. If we'd like to add extra boards in case of damages or cutoffs, we can just add those separately here by using the plus or minus buttons. And here we can see that Price of Job has also calculated the maximum span to be 3.7 meters. Next we can specify the strutting. And again, I'll just expand the sketch pane so we can have a closer look. And to avoid confusion, I'm going to remove the sleeper walls just so we have a cleaner image. There, now it's much more apparent where our strutting is. We have options to use either timber block, or timber herringbone, or metal herringbone. In each case, there is a materials drop-down list where we can choose the materials that we choose to use in terms of size. Here's our timber blocks. Here's our timber herringbone. And our metal herringbone. And then we also have options to set the number of rows, either 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, or 5 rows. And Price of Job has very helpfully reminded us that these measurements will require a minimum of 2 rows. So we'll set that for 2. Now this is based on the width of our floor. If we were to change our width, say instead of 5.5, maybe only 2.5, then the strutting required would be reduced as well to only a minimum of 1 row. Now in this example, we can see that the timber joists are resting directly on the wall. As an alternative, you might choose to use joist hangers, in which case you could select to have joist hangers on either one side, to have them connected to a beam, and although a beam is added to our sketch pane here for illustrative purposes, it is not actually factored in our estimate. If we take a look at our estimate here, we can scroll down to the joist hangers stage. And although there are hangers and nails added to our materials, there is no beam. We can also choose to hang it on both sides, or use a custom quantity of 0 to just rest it on the walls, or simply deselect the joist hangers stage entirely. If we'll be using joist hangers, then we can also select from the drop-down list to select the material size that we choose to use. If there's a size that we prefer to use that's not represented in the Price of Job library, we can use Edit Pack to choose a different material from the library or add a new material. When adding a new material, we have to input the title, the unit, the price, the category, and the website link, and then save that to the Price of Job library for further use. In this case, we'll just cancel. And we'll deselect the joist hangers stage to rest our timber floor directly on the wall. If instead of a ground floor that we were estimating this is a loft conversion, then most likely we would add joist hangers, and we would hang the joists on both sides. For now, we'll leave this deselected. Next, we'll take a look at the insulation stage. And we'll just rotate our image around so we have a better view of the insulation. And the insulation is placed between the timbers, and we have an option of either using PIR boards like Celotex or Kingspan, or we can use loft insulation rolls like mineral wool. and this is just rolled out and stuffed in between the timbers. Here we can select the type of materials we choose to use from the drop-down list and use Edit Pack if we want to add a different material. In this case, we'll use rigid board, and we'll stick with the 100mm Celotex. Next is the flooring itself, and we have options here of either tongue and groove chipboard flooring, and here under the drop-down list we can see the various types in the price of job library. We also can choose pine floorboards, and this would also be tongue and groove, and we can see some options here in the price of job library, or we could select plywood. And then we have a variety of hardwood, structural, and marine options. In this case, we'll stick with chipboard flooring and increase the thickness to a 22mm board. If we close the sketch pane, we'll notice that our description has been automatically updating to reflect all of our various changes. So for example, we can see that we're ordering ready-mix concrete C25 with a concrete pump, that we'll be using 195mm floor joists, metal herringbone strutting, 100mm Celotex insulation, and chipboard flooring fixed with screws to joists. If we'd like to add any separate notes, we can just click Add Note and then type our freeform notes here. There's also a variety of icons we can use here, including inclusions, allowances if we're not sure of a price of a material, or exclusions for something that's not included in the estimate. And any notes that we place here will persist regardless of any changes that we make throughout our estimate. If we need to edit any of these automatic descriptions, we can do so by deselecting the auto description function here, and then we can make adjustments to our description here. So for example, we might say 22mm. However, now that we've deselected our automatic description function, any further changes we make to our stages will not be reflected in the description. And if we reactivate the automatic description, any changes that we've made manually will be automatically deleted. So here, I've added sleeper wall, which was not added to our description, but if I click automatic, you can see the sleeper wall description has been added. However, our modification to the flooring has been removed. So if you have any edits to the automatic descriptions, make sure you save that for last. And Price of Job has taken all of our inputs and calculated each stage separately so we can see the materials, labor, plant, and tool required for every stage. These are all based on standard prices from the Price of Job library, but if in any case we need to override our pricing, we can do so simply by overriding the price within the field. And that highlights the overridden value in yellow so that we can see quickly that we've overridden this value. To revert back to the Price of Job system pricing, we can just click the cog icon here and click Reset, and that reverts back to the system pricing. You'll also notice that the materials have an item under the cog that lets you visit the website. And this is an opportunity to verify specifications and pricing. So in this example, we can see that this MOT Type 1 is £43 including VAT. However, on our estimate, it shows £43 plus VAT. And you might be wondering why we have a double charge of 20% here. And the reason for that would be our profit margins. If we access the profit settings here, we can see that the profit margin set on our materials is set at 20%. If we adjust this, say just to 10%, we can see that the price of our materials in the background here has changed as well. So if we were just simply to remove all profit, we can see that the price of this material is only £35 plus VAT. So we make sure to have our profit included and set to the proper levels. If our business is not VAT registered, we can specify that here, and VAT will be automatically added to all materials, plant, and tool. So if you are VAT registered, you certainly want to have this selected. Now that our estimate is complete, we can consult the Reports tab, and here we have our quotation. Let's change the title of this quotation to Quotation, and then we can show simple or advanced details here, and let's just go with simple. And we can show subtotals for each of our categories here. So for example, if we want to break down the concrete floors versus the timber floors, we could increase the pricing detail here to show subtotals for each of these subcategories. And if we want to show even more breakdown, we could show the breakdown for material, labor, plant, and tool. But we'll just keep ours simple, and we can adjust our disclaimers and notes at the bottom of the quote here by either typing directly or by clicking the plus icon here and selecting pre-written templates from the Price of Job library. And we just have to click this item to add it to our description. And when we're done, we can print the quote export it as a PDF or a Word document, or email it directly to our client right from within Price a Job. And that's how to use the Timber Floors module. Thank you for using Price a Job.